learn how to change the position of elements using the display flags property. We will also add an animation to the cookie when we click it. So this is the project from the previous video, and you can download the code from the description. If you inspect the page by right click and inspect, you will see that our elements are not centered. And this is because we used fixed pixels to change the position of our elements. So let's delete margin left and margin top. Now we see that our elements in the beginning of the page. Also, if you hover over HTML tag, you will see that our page is only 600 pixels. So I click HTML and now I can hover over blue rectangle and I see the sizes of our page. I want the page with the same size as the user's screen size. For that, I will add HTML tag and here I define height property. In this case, I use 100 view height units. View height units are the dynamic units that depends on the height. We also have view width units. And in this case, our height will be the 100% of our width. So if I hover over this blue rectangle, I see that the width and the height are the same. But I want to use view height units. And in this case, I see that the height of our page is the same as the screen size. We can change the screen size and I see that this number changes automatically. Now I will show you how to center our objects. If I hover over body, I see that it also takes only some part of the screen, but I want our body to be with the same height as our HTML page. At first, I add the same property to our body, and now I will write the combination of properties that center our objects. Now we see that our objects are centered on this page, but you see that the alignment is different. By default, our elements are aligned in the same way as they are written in the HTML. So we have P, then image, and the default alignment is P tag with the content of count, and then we have the image. But if I use the display flags property, it changes the default alignment to the row, and I can change it with flags direction property. Now my flex direction is equal to column, and you see that our elements aligned in one column. Now let's talk a bit about justified content. This property changes the position of elements depending on the flex direction. If the flex direction is column, it changes the direction on the column. Currently it is center, but for example, I can set flex start. Now you see that the position of our elements have been changed to the beginning of the column. The same will happen if I use flex end. But I will choose flex start. Now about align items. This property changes the direction along the cross axis. So cross axes are the opposite from our flex direction. If our flex direction is column, align items changes the direction along the row. So for example, I will use flex start. And now you see that along the row, our elements have been changed to the start of the screen. So the same if I use flex end, but I want to center. If you want to learn more about this powerful tool, back when I was learning, the Flexbox Froggy game helped me a lot. Here you can read the description of different properties, and then you need to write the code that moves the froggy to the lily pad. So for example, here we need to write justify content flex end. And now we see that our froggy is on the lily pad. And in the same way, you can learn about other properties of the display flags. We also want to add a small animation to our cookie when we click it. Currently, if we click, only the count will be incremented. So at first, I think that we need to increase the width of our image. So for example, let's put 350 pixels. And actually the topic of animations in CSS is advanced. But I found the way how to easily explain you a very simple animation. Each element on our page has several states. For example, image has the default state and the active state. When I click on the image, I change the state to the active. I can click and then I grab this image, and while I grab this image, the state of this image is active. What we want to do is actually to change the size of the image when it is in the active state. Right after the image, let's add a new selector. To change the properties of the active state, I add column active to my tag. So this is a complicated selector that activates some style properties only when our image is in the active state. And for example, let's change the width to 330 pixels. And now let's try to click. So you see that we have this simple animation, and while I'm holding the image, the size of this image is 330 pixels. I see that it changes relative to the top of the image, but I want to change this animation relative to the center of this image. A very simple solution is to add a margin to the top. For example, I add 10 pixels. And now we see that our animation is relative to the center, but I still think that this is too plain. So let's rotate this image a bit. So deg means degrees and -2 means to change the rotation to the left by 2 degrees. And now if I click, you see that we have a very interesting and simple animation. But this is not the proper way how we should write animations in CSS. So the proper way of the same animation is much more complex, but I think that currently you can understand what it means. So if I click the cookie, we have almost the same animation, but this is a bit smoother. So you see that we have this. You see that we have the same image active tag that changes the scale to 92%. So we decrease the scale by 8% and we rotate the image by 2 degrees. And then we have additional transition property in the image that adds a smooth transition that lasts 0.5 seconds. Let's also remove the scrolling bar. In the HTML tag, I can add scroll bar width property with non-value. And now we see that we don't have any scroll bar, but we still can scroll it a bit. Also, when you click the cookie a lot, at some point you can hold this image. I want to remove this property, and the easiest way how to do it is actually to go to the HTML. And here I pressed Alt-Z to wrap the file. And now in the image tag, right after the ID, I can add draggable false. And now if I save this file, I hold this image, but I don't see the picture of this image. Let's also change the background of this page. Currently our background is gray. I want to add this custom color. You can hover over this square and here you can change the color, and then the code will be updated automatically. If I save the file, you see that we have another color, but I like this dark blue color. The same with the font color. I want to change it to a bit darker white color. Again, you can hover over it and change as you like. In the next video, we will add buttons for the click power and auto click upgrades.